you go. Okay, so we will do some introductions. So I'll do myself first. So my name is Dan Rowlands, and I'm the Safeguarding Training Manager for Stockport Safeguarding Children's Partnership. So basically, what that means, what the partnership is everybody who works in Stockport with children, and then there's the Safeguarding Adults Board, which is obviously the adults version. The statutory partners are health, the local authority, and police, but we're really keen to get engagement with and kind of link up with voluntary sector. I came along to a Sector 3 Sector Connector event a while ago, which was really useful to kind of see and get introduced to various kind of organisations. I'm really keen on it because it's really important that we support and have links with. It's a two-way process, if you like. So my background is I'm a social worker. I'm a trained social worker, social work manager. I managed referral teams in Salford and Cheshire East. I've been based, I'm 30, I'm 46 now. I wish I was 30. I'm 46 now, and I've been working with kids since I was 18. So it's all I've ever done. So I've got loads and loads of experience in kind of various different places. And I've been in Stockport now for 2 years doing this job. And I've worked in Stockport before in residential and lived in Stockport, actually. I've been a resident of Stockport as well. So, yeah, if I could just ask you guys, I'm going to go down the list first, just to say who you are and what organisation you represent. That'd be really useful just for me to get a handle on it. So, Lynn, would you go first? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Lynn Brandwood. I'm the SEO of a charity in Reddish called Readish. That's not at all confusing. So we have a variety of different projects, and at the moment, I guess the one that's probably most relevant to this is that we're working with Our Time on they've been doing some outreach work in Reddish, and we're looking at supporting them, bringing some of the kids into a youth club on a regular basis, especially over the winter. So yeah, and
okay.
we do have involvement with children on other projects as well. So we have kids from doing D&V, sometimes volunteering in a shop or in the or in our food bank as well.
Okay. Do you have adults as well involved?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, as in you support adults? Yeah. Okay. Grand. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Tina.
Hi everyone, I'm Tina. I'm the Director of Forward, Stockport LGBT Centre. We run a helpline for the LGBT plus community, and also virtual socials at the moment to support people through the wonderfulness that is COVID. That's me.
Tina, what's your surname? Sorry.
Carnally.
Carnally, that's right. Okay, yeah. Sorry, just trying to remember. Okay, Andy, finally, not least, you.
Hi, I'm Andy Shaw. I'm a volunteer at Cirrus Cyclone in Stockport, which is a bike workshop and alternative education provider.
That's where I know you from.
Yeah, I remember seeing you. I can't remember where. Have you been into the workshop?
Well, I myself and Brian Pendlebury go back quite a long way. So Brian used to be my kickboxing instructor when I first moved into Stockport. So yeah, I've known Brian since about '97, I think, and still, you know, I'm still kind of in touch with him and working kind of socially as well, really. So yeah, I've known him for a long time. But I've seen you in there. That's where I've been in a few times just to come and look at bikes and talk to Brian, really. Okay. So brilliant, well, perfect. Kind of a good mix, really. You've got, you know, you'll be coming into contact with children and adults. It looks like all of you will. Right, what I'm going to do is we've got 50 minutes now. I'm going to run through what is an absolutely massive subject, and I am going to run through it fairly quickly, but this is just a starting point, if you like.
He's still Stan.
Hello.
Hi, we've not introduced ourselves at Health Watch.
Oh, sorry, I can't see you on my I can't see you on my little video thing. Apologies, Ian. I can see you and Angela.
There is quite a few more, Dan. So
okay.
I'm just
Right,
thinking, if you want to get through the session, it might be good if people just kind of quickly say who they are and where they're from for you.
All right, yeah. So, Ian, if you wouldn't mind saying where you're from.
Hi, I'm Ian Gardner. I'm Chair of Allotment Stockport. We are encouraging lots of families, especially young children, to come on to the allotments. So I'm working on a safeguarding system for all our sites. Brilliant. And you've got the perfect name for the job that you're doing, and you've also got a dog wandering across your shoulders behind you. That's great stuff. Okay. Who else have we got? Just anyone else? Who else have we got? Sorry, Claire Worthington. Are you there, Claire? You're muted. Are you there? Can we hear you, Claire?
Yeah, unfortunately, Zoom's up to no good. Yeah.
Won't be the first time.
I'm Claire Worthington. I do various different things, but I'm here today with my Space Stockport hat on. So we run a parent support group primarily for parents and carers who've got children with ADHD. So at the moment, we generally speak to their parents or their carers, but going forward, we would like to do more stuff with the children and young people. So it's really understanding what things we need to know about, what things we need to have in place besides sort of the common sense thing, because at some point we are going to start doing things with children and young people. And it's just about, right, what do we not know about now? What things have we not thought about, because it's not something that we've done in the past.
Okay, brilliant.
Health Watch.
Yeah,
Health Watch.
It's Shirley, Maria and Claire from Health Watch in our socially distanced office. We work for Health Watch Stockport, which is a local health and social care champion. We work with all different types of groups to make sure their voices are heard at CCG and provider level.
Great,
thank you very much. To the three of you, nice to meet you.
I think the last one I can see, Dan, is Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hi, I'm from Wycliffe and St Peter's churches. We want as many community groups as possible to use the buildings, and Wycliffe is also looking to arrange a 10-year lease with a boxing club for young people, Paramount Boxing Club.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, right, nice to meet you all. Big variety of people, really, and all people. You're all going to come into contact at some point with potentially vulnerable people and safeguarding issues. So I'm just going to run you through this slideshow. So I've introduced myself. You guys have as well. Just really quickly, some ground rules, safety stuff. Obviously, you're on camera. You've got your microphones. Just be aware if anyone's in the background. That's where the child and the dog comes in. We've already had a dog. Just be aware about who's around and who can hear you. Okay, because whilst we're not going to talk about any details of people, that's really important that you don't mention details. So no dates of birth, names, etc. If you have got any examples of things, you're quite welcome to share those as long as it's anonymised. Be aware of your camera as well, anyone around. Just be aware of those kind of privacy issues. We've got an hour. Try not to take phone calls. If you've got headphones, they're great because they cut out background noise. There's also a chat function as well, which I've put my email address in there. I mean, you're either welcome to, just as I've said before, raise your hand, shout up if you want to ask anything. More than happy to take questions, or if you put them into the chat function, I'll try to keep my eyes on that as well. Finally, most importantly, the fruit and veg bit, that is there in order that you remember to take care of yourselves, okay? There's a couple of things about that. One is taking care of yourself as a person, but also about the people who you are serving, okay, people you are working with. It's really, really important. If you're worried about something that's of a safeguarding nature, don't sit on it, okay? Make sure that you are able to, speak to somebody about it, and I'll give you the links on these slides. What I'll do is I'll get the slides sent to Simone as a PDF so that you are able to access the links, etc. from there. Okay, so the useful resources, etc., and hyperlinks should work on those as well, even if it's a PDF. But yeah, do not sit on something you're worried about. Check it out. Okay, this is just really quickly local context for you. So these stats are from the back end of last year. So again, they will have changed, but just gives you a brief kind of overview around children. Okay, so that's 62,900 children. When it says 0 to 17, it means under 18. You know, up to 18 years. Just gives you a little brief, and I am aware there are some acronyms on there which I will explain some of them. Okay, just gives you a brief overview of kind of safeguarding issues for children. So what it says there, 5,908 MASH contacts. What that means is there were 5,908 either calls or emails into social care from people worried about children in a year. Okay, got referrals to social care there. So not all. When we say here contacts, not all of those will have gone to social care. Some will be like Claire, you work for with special needs children. Some will be around education, disability, etc. All these figures here tell you kind of different levels that children are being responded to. So 2008 children in need. That's basically children who require services. So I'm not going to go into masses of detail there, but it just gives you a snapshot really, and you're going to have these slides. Okay, the kind of this figure here, children subject to a child protection conference and a child protection plan, they're the children who are most at risk. Okay, so it's a statutory intervention, a child protection plan with a social worker with that child, but they're the children who are most at risk. Okay, so I'm going to just leave it there because we've not got much time, but you can ask any questions you like. This is a little piece of research we've done from Office of National Statistics and Census. So again, this was back end of last year. Don't be confused by the date in the left hand corner. That just tells you when we're accessing it. So it says if Stockport were 100 children, and it kind of gives you a breakdown really about some of the health issues, some of the issues for children. It's got mental health issues in there, the different ages of children, the ethnic mix of Stockport, which isn't. It's not a very ethnically mixed area, and also where kind of a brief idea about children who are living in the most deprived areas. Stockport is quite different in some ways to Manchester, just down the road, and different to other local authorities. It's still quite an affluent area, although there are areas within Stockport that are deprived. So it's quite an interesting mix in Stockport. So you're going to come across a whole range of children. You've obviously got areas, and I'm being general, but you've got areas like Marple, Bramhall, okay, which are areas of pretty high affluence. And then you've got areas in Stockport which aren't, Adswood and Brinnington. If you guys are from Stockport, I'm not trying to preach to the converted, but what that means is you are going to come across all sorts of issues in relation to safeguarding. And what I would say is, don't fall into the trap of thinking because somebody's from a nice area that safeguarding isn't going to happen to them, or a safeguarding issue isn't going to happen to them. Vice versa. Don't think because someone comes from one of the, in inverted commas, deprived areas that they're going to have, they're necessarily going to have more safeguarding issues than anyone else. Okay, so it's really important to keep an open mind when it comes to safeguarding. Okay, so this is, statutory guidance is really important. You guys are all going to have to work to that, whether you are volunteers, whether you're in paid employment, whether you're doing it for free, it doesn't matter how you set up, you are all going to have to adhere to, in particular, we could pick masses and masses of legislation. The main one there for children, anyone working with children is governed by the Children Act. So it came into force in 1989. Does anyone know it was amended in 2004? Anyone heard of a particular case and why that was amended? What that kind of led? It led to the Children Act being amended. Okay, anyone know of a really famous child protection case? Don't worry if you don't. Okay, anyone heard of Victoria Climbié? Okay, no? Oh yeah. Okay, so Victoria was a young girl in Hackney. She had, Haringey. Apologies, Hackney. She was in Haringey, and she came over here from France, and she was looked after by her uncle and her aunt, and she was killed by them. And what happened is, no agent. There were something like 26 different agencies working with Victoria at various times, and nobody put all the information together about what was going on. So they each had little bits and little pieces of information that they were worried about. I'm going to say some things that aren't very nice, you know, so just be prepared for that. She was tied up in a bin bag. She was put in a bath. She had over 100 different bruises on her body when she died. So she was subject to loads and loads of abuse from her uncle and aunt because people didn't put the pieces together. They missed it. Okay, so that's why in 2000, well, it was actually 2003, but the Act came into being in 2004. So just that's why it changed. All of you guys have to follow that piece of legislation if you're working with children. But if you've ever read any legislation, it's gobbledygook. It doesn't talk normal speak. So if you want to have it translated, the working together to safeguard children is like your guidance relating to the Children Act. So you guys working with kids must have that, and families as well. And I'd suggest with adults as well. Even if you're just working with adults, make sure that you get a copy of that. Again, the links are at the end of the slide. It's an electronic document. You don't have to download it and print it now. So working with adults, anyone working with adults, the Care Act 2014, that is like the Children Act. It's like the Bible, if you like, that you've got to follow. And that looks at all care and support needs for adults who may be vulnerable or may be at risk. It also, when you talk about adults, but also some children, the Mental Capacity Act is really, really important, because what it kind of does, what it says on the tin, it assesses if an adult or a child 16 and above has the capacity to make decisions about what happens in their life. So that's really important when you're working with people, because obviously you should be including them in decisions you're making about services you provide, etc. But if somebody lacks capacity, that's where the law may step in and certain safeguards may be put in place. Okay. And then finally, Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act. So that brought in the DBS system. So do you remember Ian Huntley? Ian Huntley was, it was the Soham murders, okay? So he had a police history, and that didn't get linked up. So he was able to work with children as a caretaker in a school. And obviously I'm sure you know about that case where tragically he murdered those two girls. So those are just some basic bits of legislation for you. There's loads and loads of it. What I'd say is working together to safeguard children is your really kind of useful tool. And then at the end, there's a link to the adults website and the children's website as well. That will give you more information about any guidance you might need. Okay, so that's legislation. There's loads of it. We haven't got time to go through it all. So does anyone, I'm going to ask you guys some questions now. When it comes to safeguarding children, anyone got any ideas about what that might mean? What does safeguarding mean? Anyone got any ideas? Don't be shy. Type in, speak up, see what you think.
Keeping them free from harm.
Brilliant. Yeah. So keeping people free from harm, children free from harm, and adults. Anything else? We've got someone in the chat, have we? Protecting from potential dangers, absolutely. So there's a couple of things there that you mentioned which are really good. It's about the potential for something to happen, and not just doing something as a reaction to when something happens. So as well as protecting from harm and as well as protecting from potential dangers, safeguarding is about making sure that children and adults as well basically reach their potential, that they do the best they can. So as well as reactionary measures, it's also about being proactive and ensuring that children get the best and achieve the best that they can. Okay, so I'll show you the definition of it. This is the official definition, and it's from Working Together. It's from that document. Okay, so that's what it is. That's what safeguarding children is. So safeguarding and promoting the welfare, protecting them from harm, you've said that. Preventing impairment of children's health, yes, you've said that. But then if you like, the bottom two are the proactive elements of that as well. So it's not just about reacting, it's about being proactive. And there's lots and lots of things you can do within your organisations. This will only give you some tips about that. There's a whole host of things you can do within that, and you need to do to ensure that. So DBS checks is one of those. So making sure that people who are working with children and vulnerable adults are safe to do so is a preventative measure, a proactive measure. It's not a reaction to something happening. Okay, we all good with that? All happy? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So this is a diagram that we call the windscreen. Okay, that's its common name, if you like. Every authority has one. Every local authority has one when it comes to services for children and who children are and what services they may need. It's also called the continuum of need, but if you ever hear it called a windscreen, that's what it means. And what it does is it says where children are and what response would happen. So the green bit here at the bottom, universal services, that is children who are doing really well. They're meeting the milestones, they're not needing extra additional support, doing well in education, or ticking along nicely. We may or may not come into contact with those. Certainly as a social worker, I didn't come into contact with those guys because they were happy. Okay, so that's universal or level 1. Okay, in Stockport, level 2, bear in mind different authorities might change how they cut this up, but in Stockport, that's where you get children who have an additional need. Okay, so Claire, you mentioned ADHD. It might be a child who's got speech and language difficulties and needs a referral and some input from, say, a health visitor or a speech and language specialist. Okay, so they would fit in there, and you would think about what services you would put into place. And there is something called an early help assessment in Stockport, and there is nationally as well. And that is a form and a process that you go through with families to find out everything that they need, the strengths, the areas where they might need support, and you form a plan. So that's there, okay? And that is called Team Around the Family. So it'll be somebody who's not a social worker coordinating that plan with the child, okay? It might be a family support worker, an early years worker, one of you guys, a voluntary work, a voluntary agency. It can be anyone who does that, okay? And then when we start getting into level 3, okay, that's when there's children with, children with more serious and more complicated needs. So Claire, ADHD would fit into that. If you've got a child with ADHD, maybe financial difficulties in the home, maybe some lower level parental mental health issues. So if there's lots of issues, that would start getting a service, either a ramped up service from somebody who isn't a social worker, or a social worker would need to come into play. And then finally, we've got level 4. Okay, so that's where the children in that area are most at risk. So they will be children who are at risk of significant harm. They might have been abused, they might have suffered adversity, etc., and they will need a social worker and a child protection plan. Okay, and then finally, obviously, you will have heard of children who go into care. We refer to that as looked after children. So if you like, unfortunately, that's the end, the last step for children. We don't want children to be there, but we know that sometimes they're safer being looked after by carers or living in children's homes, etc. So why that's useful for you guys is there is also on our website some more guidance about the kind of issues that children might face and where that might put them. The reason I say this is important to you guys is if you've got any safeguarding concerns about children, it helps you to picture where they are and who might give that support. Okay, so and it's really useful if you ever rang up children's services and said, I'm really worried about a child, because you will be asked on a referral form to say whether you think they're level 1, level 2, level 3 or level 4. Okay, so again, we've got limited time here, but the guidance, there is associated guidance with that, and you will get these slides and you'll be able to kind of read them really, but it's it's important that you have that and have access to that in your organisations. Okay, are you guys all right? Any questions about that? All okay? Okay. So safeguarding adults, I'm a children's social worker, but in Stockport we're really keen on linking up adults and children's safeguarding and adults and children's training. Okay, because what we know is children don't come on their own. Adults don't come on their own a lot of the time. They all come in families, don't they? They don't come separate from each other. They're all together. So there's a phrase called think family, which means you always think, you know, if I'm a children's social worker, I'm there for the children, but I'm not going to ignore the parents' needs either, and vice versa. If you're working with adults, you need to think about the children as well. Okay, so that is the definition around safeguarding adults. Okay. Yeah, so just give you a minute to, and that again, that comes from the guidance associated with the Care Act. Okay, this is Stockport's policy definition. So an adult at risk, okay, this is where abuse can happen, an omission or an act or a violation of an individual's dignity, human or civil rights, which causes harm. Okay, an adult at risk is defined as someone 18 or over, in need of care services because of mental or other disability, age, illness, frailty, etc. They might have not able to take care of themselves and can't protect themselves. The bit about capacity there is really important as well. Remember, I mentioned that before. That's when adults, they can't make those decisions about themselves, or they can't hold on to information long enough to make decisions about themselves. And what happens is they end up doing what's called making unwise decisions. The law's different. Now, we're all allowed to make unwise decisions, but if you're lacking capacity, that's where the law comes in, and that's where the Care Act comes in. Okay, so the law is different for adults and children, because as an adult, you're able to make unwise decisions. You know, I can go out today and go and get really drunk and take drugs and, you know, go running around causing mayhem. That's a very unwise decision, but obviously that would border into the criminal. So that's the difference really in an unwise decision and where the law would step in as well. Okay, so that is adults. Just some really quick points for you guys to remember. This is for safeguarding adults, it's for safeguarding children. Okay, really important to remember this. You've all got a responsibility. Okay, so nobody can say, well, it's not my job to make sure that child is safe, or it's not my job to make sure that adult is safe. That's the teacher's job. If you are presented with a safeguarding issue, you have a duty, you have a responsibility to do something about it. Okay, you've all got a role to play. So it might be that there's a social worker working with children who are coming and accessing your provision, okay, but you will have a really important role to play. Ian, for example, you just mentioned you're trying to get loads of kids and families coming in and doing some stuff at your allotment. Well, your role will be really important in a safeguarding matter, because you'd be providing children with a safe space, you'd be providing them with education. So everybody's got a role to play, okay. Nobody can have the full picture. That's the bit when I said about Victoria Climbié. Children and adults and families and people will often give pieces of information. They'll give different pieces of information to different people depending on who they get along with. So they might tell the teacher half a story, and they might tell the social worker the other half of the story. Obviously, those two people need to come together to get that full picture of what's going on. And again, that includes you guys as well. Whatever you're doing, whatever provision you're providing. Okay, so we've got someone here from a church. You might get a child coming into the church or an adult coming into the church that you're really worried about. Well, they may tell you something, and it's really important that you're able to know where to go with that information. And I will tell you where to go with that as well. Okay, so the sharing information bit's really important. People get really worried about sharing information. They think, oh, I can't tell that. Somebody's told me in confidence. The rules are really simple. And I say that because I've been doing it for years. I appreciate people might be worried. The rule about children is even more simple than adults. So the rule about children is, if you are worried about the welfare of a child, you've got a duty to do something and to share that information, okay? And the word is duty. If you're worried about an adult, okay, it depends what that information is. But again, it's quite simple that if you're worried about an adult being at risk of harm, being vulnerable, a criminal act being, undertaken against an adult, again, you've got a duty to do something about it. Nobody's been shot for sharing information about a safeguarding nature. What happens is it's the other way around. When there's an inquiry into stuff, usually the question is, well, why didn't you tell somebody about that? You know, an adult came to you and said, I'm suffering abuse at the hands of my wife, husband, girlfriend, whatever. Why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you even check it out? So that it's always better to check that out and share that information, okay? Obviously that doesn't mean you're going to go singing it to everyone in the community, but it means speaking to the right people about it, okay? Doing something about it promptly as well is very, very important. So if somebody comes and tells you I'm being abused, don't wait a week to do something about it. Now, you might think that sounds obvious, but if I had £1 for every time that's happened when I've been sat on the front door of social care, managing one of those teams, and let's say a teacher rings up and says, Johnny's here, he said his dad's been beating him up. When did he tell you this? Oh, last week. Where is he now? Oh, is it his dad's? Yeah. Oh, why didn't you do something? Just don't sit on it, okay? It's really, really important that you check something out and you do it quickly, okay? Children are up to 18 years. We often forget that. So we often forget when they're 16 and the horrible little teenagers causing loads of trouble and, maybe not being very nice to the parents sometimes, they're still children. You don't become an adult until you're 18. So it's really important. It's a very difficult age. And I would not like to be a teenager now at this current time. I wouldn't like to be in college. I wouldn't like to be in school. I wouldn't like to be going away to university. Any of those things must be really, really difficult for kind of that older teenage. And then also, really, just because somebody's over 18 and they're an adult doesn't mean they can't be at risk. Okay, so they're really, really important things to remember. Just keeping an eye on time because we've got plenty to do. Right, I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions. Okay, so there is a statement. What I want you to do is that okay? Is that a safeguarding matter? What do you think, that statement there? Is it allowed? Is it okay? What do you think? So if you see a parent smacking a child in your establishment, is it okay? Okay, so
I don't think it's okay, not allowed, as Tina said.
Okay, yeah, not allowed. Okay, so not okay and not allowed are two different things when it comes to parental chastisement of your child. You're right, it isn't okay, and I would never advocate that, and you should never advocate that either. You should never let that should never let that drop if you see that happen. So you should always say to a parent, you might approach them and say, is everything okay? Are you all right? Is there anything you need help with? Okay. But what the law states is it's currently, and it's going to change pretty soon. The law says a parent it's technically illegal to smack your child. However, there's like a loophole. Have you heard of reasonable chastisement? I don't know if you've heard of that phrase. What that means is it basically means that as a parent, you've got kind of a legal defence where you're allowed to physically chastise your child as long as it doesn't cross a certain boundary. So as long as it doesn't cause a mark or create significant harm. However, it's a very grey area because it's also really, really easy for an adult smacking a child to hurt them. And then obviously, as well as the physical issues, you've got a whole kind of set of concerns about the emotional impact. And we've got someone on here, I think, who was talking about parenting classes. If a parent's doing that, it suggests they've lost control a little bit. So it's really important. That's what the law's a bit grey. It's going to change. We're only one of 4 countries in the EU who allow it. Scotland's just banned it. What we on 2020? Scotland banned it last year, and it's come into effect now. We're going to be doing the same thing, and quite rightly, it just makes it a bit easier. I think it makes the law easier. Okay, so that's one statement. What about this one here? Do you think is that an issue? Okay. So Charles is registered blind and his neighbour Frank comes in to read his mail to him. This includes him having access to Charles's bank account details. Is that a problem?
Depends whether or not that's what Charles has asked him to do.
Yeah, good point. So, and also depends what Frank's intentions are and how honest he is. There could be an issue there, couldn't there, where Charles is at risk of financial abuse. So is at risk of being abused financially. Okay, so that's that. What about an 11-year-old child being left at home regularly whilst parents go to work? Is that okay? Is it a safeguarding issue?
Yeah, I know it says 11, but is there an actual age in law for that?
No. Very
there
good
isn't.
point.
That's where
No,
it's difficult, isn't it?
No, there isn't. There's no law. There's no age in law that says you can leave your 5-year-old at home, you can leave your 8-year-old at home, you can leave your 12-year-old at home. There is no law. What happens is that is down to parental choice and parental responsibility. So it also is down to, and I don't want to give the game away before we do the last question really. It's down to what, if, how, when, all of those other contextual questions. So if an 11-year-old is left at home for 10 minutes whilst his mum and dad swap shifts over and his neighbour looks out for him and he's competent, he's capable, he's got a foot, all of those kind of things, there's no law that's saying you can't, and he's not scared and he's not worried and he knows where to go. Now, who's been left at home? I have as a kid. At 11 I had my own key. And I was walking around and walking to and from school and and that's okay. But it's really about all the things around it. There is guidance on it, really good guidance from the NSPCC. They say no child under 16 should be left overnight alone. And I think they say no child under 4 should be left alone at all, really. So like, you know, even little babies left alone for 5 minutes, you just shouldn't be doing it. But it really depends on context. So the final one is really important for some of you guys. So volunteer regularly working with children without a DBS check. Is that all right?
Isn't it that there has to be somebody? In some cases, it might be that there's more than one volunteer and one of them is, but perhaps the other one isn't. Yeah. Are there some rules like that?
Yeah, there are. There's rules around making sure that if you're on your own, so if you're not got a DBS check, you need to be supervised by somebody who has. On these slides, I've got a link to some guidance about DBS checks because it's a really important issue for volunteers as well. And if you're regularly working with children on your own, you should be having a DBS check. Okay, without supervision, you should be having a DBS check. There's guidance on these slides. There's a link to guidance about that because I'm sure it's going to be important for some of you guys as well to consider. Okay, again, I'm conscious of time. We're going to fly through these slides. So there's 10. I'm going to look at forms of abuse now. Some of this, I'm going to mention a couple of things that aren't very nice. Okay, so. There are 10 types of abuse. There are 4 types for children and adults. Does anyone know what they are, what they're categorised as? Anyone got any ideas?
Is it like physical, sexual,
financial,
emotional?
Yeah, good. Okay, so for children and adults, it's physical, sexual, emotional and neglect. Financial, who said financial, sorry?
Health Watch.
Health Watch. Financial is an adult form of abuse. Okay, so physical. What you might see is the reason being financial is an adult form of abuse is usually children don't have aren't financially soluble and they've not got their own. You know, they don't have access to huge amounts of cash, so there's not much point in financially abusing. You know, it's generally not something that's thought about for children. Sexual abuse. So, for example, sexually transmitted infections or pregnancy in young people. Talking about for children, you might see that, and if it's in really young children, you would be worried about that. Psychological or emotional abuse, or lack of confidence or self-harm, they're just 2 indicators. Neglect or acts of omission. So the typical ones we think of are like a child or an adult who's malnourished or not doesn't have their medical needs met, but also that home alone. So the scenario we talked about before, if kids are being left on their own regularly, where it's not suitable and it's not appropriate, then that could come into neglect. The one we see really, really often is like really young kids. I worked over the lockdown. I went and did some social work assessments, and one of the cases I worked with, one of the families, the kids had been left alone. They were 7 and 5, and they were left alone. Well, we reckon for probably about 12 hours they were left alone, and they went knocking on a neighbour's door because they were scared and worried. So that's an example of neglect. When it comes to adults, then in addition to those 4, you've got these forms of abuse as well. Okay. So you mentioned financial abuse. That is about looking at kind of, you know, the scenario with Charles potentially. Okay, so domestic abuse, financial, modern slavery. You may well have heard of that. It's a massive hot topic at the moment, and we haven't got time to go into it, but we do training on that. Some of you, I'll talk to you about training shortly. Discrimination, so that could be, you know, people's race, colour, gender, sexual persuasion, whatever that is. Organisational, institutional, so for example, being denied services because of where you live or who you are. And then self-neglect is really important with adults. Children can't self-neglect, it goes the theory, because they should be provided for by a parent or carer. But an example of self-neglect in an adult would be not taking medication, you know, drink or drug use, and going against all the kind of medical advice, you know, and not kind of adhering to medical advice. So that's a really important form of abuse, and it's just in adults. Okay, so some of those things are very nice. We do more training about this, which I suggest you come on. You're welcome to come on it. If you're a not-for-profit organisation or a small community organisation, the training is free. Okay, free for you guys. If you make money and you're a company, unfortunately you have to pay. But you know, it's good that for not-for-profit organisations it's free. Okay, so this is what to do. Okay, if you come across any of those scenarios and you're worried about it, or you're worried about a child or an adult, okay, if you can speak to them, do so. Okay, you're not there to conduct a police inquiry. You're not there to conduct an in-depth inquiry. But what you want to do is just find out a little bit of information from them about what's happened. So I'll give you a really easy example of that. If you've got a child who is in your organisation, they come to one of your groups and they've got a bruise, okay, don't say, that's a nasty bruise, did your dad do it? Because that's putting words into their mouth, isn't it? Okay, yeah, you might know their dad and you might think their dad's not a very nice person and their dad's completely capable of doing that, but don't say that. Okay, what you say is, Johnny, oh, that's a nasty bruise, how did that happen? So you've asked a question already, how? Yeah, they say, my dad did it. So you can also ask, oh, when was that? Yeah. Oh, where were you? You can ask the what, when, how, where questions. Very easy questions, but don't go into loads and loads of detail and put them under pressure. Get as much information as you can quickly, okay, and then reassure that child or that adult and say, look, you've done the right thing by telling me. You know, I am going to have to speak to somebody about it, but you know, I'm here to help you. And then what you need to do is kind of follow those steps there. Obviously, if it's an emergency, don't, you know, if it's, I use a stupid example, okay? If you see a man running down the street with an assault rifle, you're not going to ring a social worker, are you? You're going to ring 999. You're also not going to ring 101. You're going to ring 999, okay? So if a child or an adult is in immediate danger or a crime's going to be committed or being committed, ring the police, don't ring a social worker. Social worker's just going to go out with a clipboard and get shot like everybody else, okay? But if it's things you're worried about children, that's the number there to ring. It's called the MASH, okay? The MASH stands for Multi-Agency Safeguarding and Support Hub. Right, it's your front door for any service for children and families. So that can be from a social work response right through to early help responses. So people who might need parenting support, a child with ADHD who might need some additional support in school. They cover everything, okay? And you can ring them and tell them what you're worried about and who you're worried about, okay? It's got the adult number on there, and it's got the out of hours number. So the out of hours number is outside normal office hours and weekends, basically. There's also a link there to the referral form for the children's MASH. If it's the adults you're talking about, you ring that number, okay? All of those are on the slides. Again, conscious of time. Got 10 minutes to do about a million things. Just in terms of safer working practices, this is really, really important for you guys. Sector 3 will give you some support about this, I think. You possibly, I mean, you've got your sector connector events. So I've been to one of those and it was really, really interesting thinking about safeguarding was one of the things that was talked about there. The NCVO are a really, really good organisation. They're a national organisation. You can join them. There's different costs and it may be free for some of you, but they provide some really, really good advice and templates for setting up organisations, okay? What you might need to do to keep your workplace safe. NSPCC also provide that as well. They provide similar stuff. They also provide something called CASPAR. If you use the link and go on the NSPCC website, it tells you everything. But CASPAR is a weekly mail out that gives you updates on policy and guidance and loads of interesting stuff to do with children. And then MetaWare is all about online safety. So all that can be accessed from that, from the NSPCC website there. You've got Sector 3s there. And you've got the DBS guidance I mentioned before. Okay, yeah, Simone's just put Sector 3 in the chat. Thank you, Simone. And it's there as well. That will be a hyperlink. Really important that you have a look at those and have a read of those. Again, conscious of time, so I'm going to just keep moving on. Those are some things, I'm not going to go through this, but that's just some things to think about when you are working with children or adults in terms of thinking about like a cycle of how are you going to keep people safe. It starts with recruitment. Make sure you're recruiting the right people. Make sure you've got an interview process. You know, you don't want to recruit somebody you know is a risk to children. Let's just say that. That sounds obvious, but you want to make sure you got the right people in. You induct them into your organisation. You access training or you give them training. You are aware about where to go if there's an allegation or a concern about a worker. And obviously DBS, make sure DBS is in place as well, where appropriate. Not got time again to go into all this, but these are all the things that you might need to consider around organisations setting up. So Claire, you said you'd never done it before. Safety and suitability of premises space, I think, is on Upper Hillgate, isn't it? Is it up there? Is it the little community place? Like a little community centre, is it? I think, are you on mute?
Yeah, it's not. It's not really open at the moment, obviously, because of current things. But it's linked to Disability Stockport. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, I've been in there. Yeah, so you need to think about safety and suitability of premises. You know, any medical needs, e-safety is really, really important, and what to do. All of these things you're going to need to think about. Again, time-wise, we haven't got masses of time left, and I want to try and squeeze the rest in. So these are some times when you may be vulnerable if you're alone with a child. Okay, just thinking about those there. What, you know, why you might be vulnerable as a worker. If you're on your own with a child and that child makes an allegation, obviously there's nobody else around, is there? And you need to make sure you've got the right safeguards in place. So all of those things there. Lack of training, if you don't know what to do, if you've not got a recording system. Now, I appreciate some of you guys are volunteer, you know, you're setting up voluntary organisations, but it's still important to consider those things. I was speaking to someone from a volunteer organisation recently, and she said she was really keen on getting everything in place, but met quite a bit of resistance from some of her members who said, well, we just want to, you know, we want it to be just a really relaxed thing. Well, that's fine, but what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if, you know, somebody makes a complaint? So really, really important to consider all of that. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Simone. Yeah, sorry, Simone's just added something in chat. This is about the allegations management process. So we've got the Sower murders there. I'm not going to stay on that slide. You've got, this is what an allegation. So for the purposes of this process, this is what an allegation is. So where an adult working with or on behalf of a child, and it can also be an adult as well, has behaved in any of those ways. There's just been something on the Manchester Evening News website just this morning about a primary school teacher who's been sentenced for engaging in sexual activity with a child. You know, so we know it happens. It happens all the time. But an allegation might be something a lot less, you know, a lot less serious in inverted commas than that. So it might just be, somebody might just say, I'm not saying pushing a child's not great, but teachers will have had that before, where a child says, well, we were playing games and the teacher pushed me. Okay. Criminal offences or behaved towards a child that indicates unsuitability to work with children. There is a whole process around it, and these are the processes you need to follow with children. So the LADO is the local authority designated officer. If you are worried about somebody, an adult you are working with, and their suitability or something they've done, you need to contact the LADO there, and there's the telephone number. You've also got the number for adults. So if you're worried about an adult providing care to another adult, that is the number you ring there. If you don't sit on those. You can have a conversation with either of these numbers. You can ring them up and say, look, this is the issue I've got. What do I do about it? Okay. So really, really important that you do something about it. And the NSPCC, they're a really good organisation, provide a whistleblowing advice line. So again, the same thing. It does what it says there, free advice to support all professionals. And that means you guys as well. So just because you're working voluntarily or in voluntary or independent organisation, it doesn't mean you're excluded from that. So really, really important that if you're worried, speak to one of those numbers there. Either speak to Jill, who's the LADO, or ring the adults line. Okay. Wow, we're nearly at the end now. It's like a million. I've got to talk really fast to get everything in, so apologies. So that's just a really quick basic overview. Complex safeguarding, it's complex, it does what it says on the tin, but what in Stockport, we've got a team called the Aspire social work team, and they deal with all these issues, okay? It's also really important for you guys to be aware of them. So domestic abuse, you might come across that, child sexual exploitation, organised crime and criminal exploitation. Have you heard of county lines? Probably have done, quite a few of you. So that falls under that bit, okay? We do separate training sessions on all these things, so you are able to access that. Really important that you can do some further reading. Again, our website will allow you to do that. The radicalisation and extremism one at the bottom is really important to remember. There's an agenda called Prevent. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but really, really important that you know what to do in those circumstances. Again, links on our website will help you do that. I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's three young men have just been arrested and sentenced and charged and sentenced for joining a Nazi. Well, they were groomed into joining an extremist Nazi group online, and they've just been sent to prison for. Was it Denmark? No, Austria, sorry, in Austria. So we know that goes on all the time. Really, really important to just keep your eyes open and know what to do. I was going to show a video, but I'm not going to. You can access that yourselves. This is just a link, really. We do a free domestic abuse course online. Again, similar. We do it virtually as well. That's free for everyone anyway. So whether you're a profit-making organisation or not, that's really, really important that you know that you can access that. And there's some links for you guys, okay? The two here, Safeguarding Adults in Stockport and Safeguarding Adult Children in Stockport, there are two websites, okay? So on those, you'll get loads of information about a lot of what I've spoken about today, but you'll also get links on there for how to access further training, okay? I suggest you get yourselves booked on. We're running loads and loads of training, still doing it virtually. It's not as good as doing it face to face, but it does work and it does get the message across. And then you've got some links there to working together that I mentioned before. That'll give you some really good guidance about working with children. And then the Greater Manchester Safeguarding Procedures online, very important. Claire, I don't know if you're aware, you mentioned ADHD. The Stockport local office will send special educational needs and disabilities. That gives you access for children and families to all sorts of support and advice about children who have got disabilities or special educational needs. So it's a fantastic website, that is. Right, that's an hour dead.
Dan, can I just ask you something?
Hello.
Can I just ask you, mentioned this, was it the Aspire team before?
Yes, the Aspire team, yeah.
Aspire team. Are there details?
Yeah.
Are they on your website?
They are. If you wanted to access them, that's the main line. Hello. So if you had a concern, can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi.
So if you had a concern about any of those issues in particular, like domestic abuse, child sexual exploitation, grooming, about county lines, it'd be the Aspire team who deal with it, but it's the normal number there. Sorry, where did I put it? It's the MASH referral that number there. So the 0161 217 6028. That's like your front door, really. Into any concerns about a child or any concerns about an adult, you ring those numbers. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay, no probs. No probs. Anyone else got any other questions? I appreciate it's like a million, loads of information thrown at you dead quick.
What does MASH stand for again?
It stands for Multi-Agency Safeguarding and Support Hub. It's basically like the front door for children's services. But adults sit in there as well, actually. So in there, you've got social workers, you've got police officers, you've got educational support officers, you've got access to education psychology, early help, family support, early years workers. You've got it's like the first port of call for you guys. What you do is you'd pick the phone up and you'd say, "Hi, I've spoken to this child and this parent, and they really want some support. They're really struggling with debt. The housing is really bad. The kids, whatever it is, whatever that issue, you should most of the time should speak to parents about, that you're going to do that. But if you're worried about that, the only times you don't speak to parents is if you're worried about the child being more at risk. Basically, if you do, if the parent is the alleged sexual abuser. If there's, have you ever heard of Munchausen's by proxy? Anyone heard of that? Where people make up illnesses about their children. It's now called fabricated induced illness. You never talk to parents about it. You always seek advice first, because it's a mental health condition. If it's real, it's a mental health condition. And then the other one is honour-based violence. So I don't know if any of you have seen, there was a recent ITV drama called Honour. I don't know if you guys saw it, but honour-based violence is where there is a threat to an individual because the family perceive that their honour they've been shamed. So the classic Shafilia Ahmed, anyone heard of her? She was the Warrington girl who she was actually from my city, Bradford, but she lived in Warrington, and her parents killed her because she didn't want to go and get married. They wanted her to go and get married to somebody else and that's honour-based violence. If you think that's going on, don't speak to the parents about it. Okay, ring one of those numbers. Yeah, but you get out clauses. If you're in doubt, ring those numbers. Yeah, if you think, I don't know if I should speak to the parent or not, and you're worried about speaking to the parent, give them a call. They'll tell you, they'll give you the advice. They'll say, look, what you need to do now is go and just check in with the parent and ask if they're all right. Okay, so just that's your main thing. Don't worry about sharing information. Okay, ring those numbers if you're worried about children at risk or adults at risk. That's the easiest way to put it. Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant.
Any other questions?
I know there was loads there. There's a couple of questions in the chat, so I just wanted to check that we'd covered them.
Yes.
So protecting from potential dangers is TAC, team around the child. So is that still going into?
TAF is team around the family, and that is where a child is supported by somebody, not a social worker. So it might be a family support worker or a nursery worker who's working with that family, and they are meeting with other professionals and the family for a support plan. TAC is team around the child, which is headed up by a social worker usually. So that's where issues are getting more serious and there's more safeguarding issues. Other authorities call it child in need, and legally it's called child in need. Stockport like to do their own thing and they call it TAC, team around the child. Okay, I can see there's a PDR. Yes, you've got it right, Claire. Professional development review. Appraisal, it's often called an appraisal in other areas, isn't it? We call it PDR. That's what it is, a yearly kind of review of what's going on and your goals that you're setting as a worker, and a review of your performance. The reason we have those is it's a bit like an MOT check, if you like. You know, how since last year, how are things going, and you know, what do we need to work on and what do we need to fix or change, really. So yeah, you may not have those in a voluntary organisation, but it's important to know about them. Any other questions with us, Simone?
There was one from Claire, I don't know if that was answered, about the adult age always 18, or is it sometimes 25 in the same way as education, health and care plans?
No, and it's a good point. The legal age of a child is up to 18, so you know, as soon as you turn 18, legally you are an adult. However, it is a good point because the Children Act caters for kids who have been in care. So children who have been in care will then be provided for, and that's where the EHCP plan comes in as well. Children who have been in care or who have some additional needs will be supported up to it's 25 again for children who were in care. So you can get support from children's services even though you're 19, 20, 21. There are certain conditions you have to meet for that, either being in care and in full-time education, or like the EHCP does cut across. So yeah, slightly confusing, but the bottom line is legally at 18 you are an adult, so you can vote, etc., all those things. Yeah, but good point.
And Tina's asked where do you find the DA training?
Okay, so Tina, on the last our last slide, which is the resources. If you go on the website, safeguarding children in stockport.org.uk. Okay, even if you Google safeguarding, so I'll put it in here. I'll put it in the chat if you want. Do you want me to put that link in there? That'll be easy.
Yeah, well, like you say, if you're going to send me the slides, I'll make sure everyone who registered for the session gets them.
Right, I've put it in the chat as well, so you can copy that direct out of the chat if you want. But yeah, I will send the slides out.
And in terms of, because it's one I get asked by groups a lot, in terms of policy keeping around safeguarding, is it important that every organisation has a child protection and an adult protection policy if they are working in those spaces?
Yeah, I would. You know, this is. Remember me saying about the woman I was speaking to recently. Gone are the days where we can just do things ad hoc. Okay, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. You know, it's really important if you've got an organisation where the public are turning up, you're interacting with the public. The guidance, the link on the DBS gives you some good guidance about that as well, about kind of why you would have a DBS and who would. So basically, anyone who is doing something that is, especially where volunteer-wise, that isn't, you're not getting paid for it and you're working on behalf of a third party. So that's you guys, really. Anyone coming along to access your services. It's great, you know, nothing goes wrong. Possibly no one will ever come knocking on your door. But what you would hate is it's there for everyone's safety. So having some kind of policy, and the difficulty is there's no definite set way to write a policy. The links that I put in there for the NSPCC, and the NCVO, they will give you some advice. It's got a really good NCVO have got something called Know-How. I think it's called Know-How, and they give you templates and things like that. It's really important to consider that. Sector Connector, the last one I went to, this was raised there. What would be a good idea is to buddy up with other organisations and speak to other organisations. You know, writing policy is probably the most dullest thing in the world, but it's also really, really important in case, you know, for everybody's safety, really. So if you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you can find somebody else with a template and one that's already done and they're happy to share it, but by all means use that. You might need to.
I think that potentially happens across the sector, but I think it's really important that people, if they are using somebody else's template, that they make sure that they understand it, they read it, they can action it. So if there's things in there you say you're going to do and it's not relevant to your organisation, you're setting yourself up for.
It's not a paper exercise. It's not a paper exercise. That's the thing. You know, whilst writing policy there's no denying it, it's not the most exciting job in the world. It also is vital, and should anything occur in your organisation, and you've not got that, you're leaving yourselves and vulnerable adults and children up. It's also guidance, isn't it? It's like the other thing is about mission statements, really important, isn't it? So people know who you are, what you're doing, and why you're set up. The analogy I always use is about kind of organisational and induction and being good. And I'm not showing any allegiance here, by the way, but Man United a while ago, when Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge, right? They won the league with not the best team in the world. Okay, they did it because everyone coming in to Man United knew who Man United were, what they stood for, and they knew what to do. They knew what their role was. It was explicit what they were there to do. So that meant that new people coming in played the Man United way. That's how you guys need to think. Who are we? Why are we set up? Where's our rules or our kind of written code of conduct, if you like, so that we can induct people into our people who we work, people who work for us, and also the people who we serve. It's important to start to think that you shouldn't ever think, oh, we're volunteers, we're not important, or I'm not saying you do, but we're volunteers, we don't need to follow the rules. That legislation, that I said right at the beginning, covers all of you, everyone.
Yeah, so, and I think that came up in our governance, can't say it, and policy making session. That actually it's not supposed to be a dusty thing on a shelf that you don't look at, you just write it. Really should be actively reviewing it every 12 months, making sure it's still relevant, seeing if anything needs adding. But yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity to share resources, but obviously, as you say, do something with it once you've got the template to make it fit. That's great. So Dan, is there anything final?
Yes.
Simone.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, it's Maria from Health Watch. Years ago, there was an all-agency policies, particularly around adult safeguarding, that a lot of us signed up to. Is that not still in operation? And is that not something that, a policy that we can all share and utilise and adapt to our organisation?
There is a self-assessment form, or there was a self-assessment form that the local authority published. We don't. I think the difficulty with that is, I think it's stopped being kind of widely shared, really, and the reason being is that what it does is it gets you to audit your own workplace. Okay. So I can try and find a copy of that. But the reason why it was stopped shared, I think, and it's not me who kind of had the responsibility for that. It was the adult team and the education safeguarding team. But the reason why is because it's your responsibility. We were providing it as guidance, and agencies were taking that as well. As long as we've done what the local authority have said, and that's how they were viewing it, well, then we're all right. And actually, in some instances, it led to what you were saying before, really, Simone. It led to slightly sloppy practice in setting up. So people were just going tick, yeah, got that, tick. So I can try and find it for you, or try and check out about. I'll check out about the kind of who's using it, because there are still self-assessment forms for the agencies use themselves. So if I can do, and if I can share that, I'll share it with Simone if you're happy for me to do that. The policy, yeah, the kind of policy you talk about is that everybody working with children and adults should be signing up to, and when I say signing up, I don't mean it like literally writing an email, but it depends on your agency and what services you provide as well, because a very small local community organisation might not have an agreement, like a written agreement with a local authority, but Healthwatch you might do. You know, certain agencies who fall under the private, voluntary, independent sector might have like a contract that they, you know, that they enter into to provide services. So in that instance, some of you may have actually sat down and signed a service level agreement with the local authority. So yes, there is still that process in place, but it really will depend on who you are. What I'd say is you're all bound by the kind of legislation and guidance that we all are, really. It's just that possibly isn't there? Voluntary organisations you might have a complaint about the local authority, and I'm quite open to this, is that, well, we don't find anything out and we don't get enough information about or enough help about what we're supposed to do. I know that's been the case in the past. So yeah, that's why part of the reason why I'm really keen on making links with this group and other groups like it. Okay, so you've put in there, Simone, a working group around policy writing. That's a really good idea. There will be organisations already, I know there are anyway, who have, I think Cyclone have probably got a really good safeguarding policy, given that you know, depends on your experience and where you've come from and etc. So the people are at different levels.
Yeah,
no
I think we're going to have to leave it there now, because we're already over 15 minutes over, and I've got something else at 1:30. So, you know, I know it's a massive subject, so if there are extra questions for Dan, you've got extra questions for Sector 3, you think other follow-on stuff would be helpful, the emails for myself and Dan are both in the chat, and I will email the slides out to everybody. I know I've also been emailing that on the Goodness Collective email, so you can use that one as well. So just
that sounds good. What's the Goodness Collective?
Anyway, you can get us. So that's my organisation, so I do some Sector 3 work under that umbrella.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay,
all right, thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Just get in touch if you want to ask anything. Bye, guys.
Bye.